Here. I was preparing for this morning and I was reading this speech and like my heart was beating fast and I was like, when is it going to be 12? I want to do this right now. I'm so excited and inspired by it. So I'm glad for those of you who could show up. And the interesting thing is, you know, some of us may have heard Dr. Young share the translation of this speech. This is Mother speaking in Las Vegas at the Cheon Hwa Gung when Dr. Young was there and Dr. Kim was there. And he mentioned he didn't share all of it. He mentioned that in the first place, but there's so much more in here. It's a different translation to begin with, but there's so much more in there that we didn't hear in morning devotion. And yeah, I'm so moved by it and healed by it. And I think we're all just going to eat it up. So enjoy. I'm going to share my screen here. Here we go. Okay, so I kind of titled this Mother's Vision for Second and Third Generation because it's kind of like her whole heart behind this message is along those lines. And just check out this first statement. America needs to restore the second and third generations to their rightful place. You need to work hard for this. I mean, if that's like the opening statement here and Mother's being very clear at what her heart is thinking about, what's on her mind, and kind of the urgency behind this situation. And keep in mind, the setting for this, I should have mentioned, is it's a small group. Mother's talking to just a few leaders. I don't know everybody who was there, but we definitely know Dr. Young and Dr. Kim were there and a handful of others. And Mother is urgently worrying about second and third generation. She did start to mention this when we were in Korea also, about how concerned she is in America about what's happening with second and third generation. But it feels like she came to America to give this particular message to the leaders. So one of the reasons I want to start a family cafe here is to ensure that members of the second and third generations are educated and can engage in public work, yet receive a salary. That way they won't have to worry about making a living in the future. They can invest themselves and achieve their best. And it's interesting. So I think most of us know, you know, Mother asked for there to be like a heavenly cafe in Las Vegas. They do have one in Korea, and she asked for that to be built here. And I think it's under Reverend Du's leadership there. But I think she also assigned some others to kind of develop this and really create a family culture around this idea. But what's interesting here is she's being very practical too, which I really appreciate. She's not saying second generation need to like forget about their careers and only work on mission. She's specifically saying, I wanted to build this. One of the reasons is that they can receive a salary here and they don't have to worry about making a living in the future. They can invest themselves and achieve their best. And this is super comforting because this is the practical situation, especially if you're raising a family, you have to be responsible, make enough money to take care of your kids. And it's like Mother is giving this permission to explore that area. I want to create an environment that will enable those of the second generation to fully utilize their talents. For this reason, I'm giving you these rooms, these True Parents rooms at the Cheon Hwa Gung. This will become the Cheon Shim Won Prayer Hall. Please have the room soundproofed and transform this house into a training center where the Holy Spirit can work. I am giving this to you before I depart. It should be used as a youth training facility that nurtures capable new leaders. So the focus here, so I think most of us heard that Mother gave this building, gave their home to become like a Cheonpyeong training center in Las Vegas. And when this was announced, I kind of was like, okay, we can liberate ancestors. That was the feeling I got from it, right? I didn't quite understand where Mother was coming from, but as I read through this speech, I understand Mother feels like this building and this Cheon Shim Won, prayer hall and this education center is actually for our generation, is for second and third generation more than first generation. I had to switch my thinking because originally I'm thinking a lot of first generation love Changpyeong because they want to, do ancestor liberation and do Ansu and things like that. But actually, Mother is seeing this investment as specifically for us and for our children. So I had to really think and switch my mindset about what this means and why Mother is suddenly bringing this to our attention. And she gives a hint here. She talks about it quite a bit, but she's talking about this as a youth training facility that nurtures capable new leaders. And so when I think about it like that, Mother wants to give us as a gift for us and for our children more than the first generation, then my heart shifts about it. And I actually start to get excited and interested as to why Mother feels like this is important. We are working to save America. We need to establish the second and third generations. To do that requires education and heavenly spiritual works. And so we will set up here first and then at East Garden. People raised up here will go on to set up that branch. That is why I wanted to come here. So the whole Mother wanted to come to America, to this building for this purpose, to clarify the vision of this. It was announced when we were in Korea, very briefly, very quickly, but Mother felt it was so important to really explain the heart and intention behind this building and this investment. And she's, again, talking about second and third generations. And these words here, education and heavenly spiritual works. She's saying that these two areas are what's really needed for our generation. And I'm curious to that, right? My interest is piqued because yes, I understand about education. And I think a lot of that has to do with understanding the expanded version of the providence, which hasn't always been revealed in depth. But she's also saying heavenly spiritual works. And I suspect she's picking up that some kind of spiritual situation needs to happen for our generation. We know that, we've lost a lot of our brothers and sisters, or they've distanced themselves. And, even in the coming generations, we see, ups and downs and things like that. And it can be quite heartbreaking. And you have to wonder why that is, right? There's the practical side of it about family situations and not getting to the point of really owning your faith to be able to overcome the challenges that come their way. But I feel like Mother is hinting here that there's a spiritual side to it that we haven't explored, that we're not really aware of because our spiritual senses aren't as attuned. But she's emphasizing the need for this Chumbo training center for our generation. And it's the kind of thing I need to pray and think about to really understand why that is true for our generation right now. We need to make it so that countless people, regardless of whether they are of the first, second, or third generations, come here to receive grace and even participate in the blessing. That is the reason I decided to open up Cheon Hwa Gung now. Many proclamations have been made, but now we need to reap actual fruit in the era of completion. And we must make this into a place where that fruit is harvested. The Family Federation and Youth Federation should unite, centering on Chunshimwon internal training and move forward together. As elder and younger brothers, they need to go forward in unity. So first of all, she's saying this is a place for anybody to go and receive grace. And I think those of us who have been to Changpyeong and have that kind of experience, even though it's a little of a foreign experience, right? Culturally, it's a foreign experience, but I think if you've been there, there's some real spiritual power that comes from that kind of experience. There is a grace and an internal liberation that comes from being there and participating. But she's also kind of calling us out. We've made a lot of proclamations about what we're going to do and all the good things that are going to come. But she's talking about we need to actually reap the fruit right now because we're in this era of completion. But the part that really starts to make me wonder and question and think is this point about Family Federation and Youth Federation uniting, centering on this internal training that will happen in this building as elder and younger brothers. And, what does family federation mean? That in America, we kind of use it as this umbrella term, but Mother's differentiating between family fed and youth fed. We don't have a youth fed, but we do have youth, right? I feel like she's picking up on the bit of a divide that we see between elders and youngers, our generation and the elders, and how that gap hasn't quite been healed in many different areas. But she's highlighting the importance of this building, this new providential initiative, as a means of bringing unity between those generations, and a center point where both of us can come and agree on and build together, instead of expecting the youth to go this way or expecting the elders to go this way. It feels like a centering point for us to move forward together. Therefore, spiritual phenomena will take place, and we will resurrect and rebuild America. So even just stopping there, the theme I get from this speech is there's a spiritual side to things that we're not talking about enough and not aware of enough. And so worrying about second and third generation, again, the spiritual side is so important. And Mother is saying the phenomena will happen spiritually. We will witness some kind of reawakening for this time and these people. And she goes on to say, this is a Christian nation, right? The key factor in restoring the Christian realm is Jesus's hope. What did he wish for? He said he would return and hold the feast of the Lamb. Jesus was the first coming, yet there was no first appearance of the only begotten daughter. In heaven's providence, the first coming of the only begotten daughter took place only after 6,000 years. The person who comes as the Messiah at the second advent first has to find the only begotten daughter. Now, this paragraph, you guys, is kind of everything, because, some of you, I've given hints as to what kind of content was covered in Korea, and there's been a little bit of hesitancy because we were asked not to share everything just yet. It was being developed. But this straight from Mother's mouth is basically the encapsulation of what Mother asked this lecturer to give to us in Korea. And it's this point that, first of all, what was Jesus's hope for his second advent? His hope was to have the Feast of the Lamb, which we know is the marriage supper of the Lamb, the holy wedding, true parents' appearance. And she's really making it clear that Jesus was the first coming, but there was no first appearance of the only begotten daughter at his lifetime. And so Mother is making the point that how crucial the only begotten daughter is, and the appearance of it, and kind of reframing the whole point of the providence that we're in right now is for the sake of the only begotten daughter. It does not discount who True Father is and his role as inheriting Jesus's mission. There's no hint of that, right? There's no feeling of that. I think some people have heard this and felt really challenged and threatened by it, and feeling like we're not respecting Father, but that's missing the whole point, and it's missing Mother's heart, which is her desperation to bring full completion to the providence and lift up Father's offering in the process of doing so. So what she's saying here is that the person who comes as the Messiah at the second advent, True Father, our second advent of Jesus, his job is to find the only begotten daughter. Of course, Father has a lot of other jobs and a lot of other things to do, and he did a lot. But Mother is really making this point that Father's main role as the Messiah and the second advent was to make the way for the only begotten daughter, because she had not fulfilled her role at the time of the providence. And when we were in Korea, there was a differentiation, which was interesting, about the inheritor of Jesus's mission versus being the first coming of the role that someone's in. So Jesus was the first coming, and Father was the inheritor of Jesus's mission, and Mother was the first coming. So she's really standing toe-to-toe with Jesus in that way. She's the first to walk the course. She's not the second advent. She's the first advent of the only begotten daughter. And some of the content we received in Korea, and Mother hints at it here in a few pages, was When Father speaks, he almost never mentions his lineage. He almost never mentions his parenthood and his genealogy. He didn't talk about that very much, but many times he mentioned mother's lineage and the three women who had one daughters and the preparation that happened for mother. And you can find many speeches where Father talked about mother's lineage. And when you think about that and you put it together, it connects with this idea that Jesus was the first coming and mother was the first coming. There was a certain lineal preparation that happened for these first comings of these roles. Father, on the other hand, was the inheritor of Jesus's mission. So, of course, Father was prepared. His lineage was prepared. Absolutely. There was so much that went into finding true Father who could inherit the most difficult mission, right? But the point being made that mother's lineage was specifically prepared in the way that Jesus's lineage was specifically prepared to kind of bring about this shift. And it's very interesting to think about it that way, how significant mother is and the lineage and the preparation that went into her appearing at this time, and that her role is the most significant role right now. And it's like our movement hasn't quite figured it out, right? She'll talk about it in a second, but it's like we haven't quite woken up to the fact of who true mother is and why it's important and what we need to shift in our thinking to really bring about a change in the providence. So she's saying about Father here, or the second advent of the Messiah. He has to meet her. Isn't that the principle? It is the second coming after all, isn't it? What was the desire of the Messiah at his first coming? It was to become the true parent. Then what does the Lord of the second advent have to do? He has to bring that to pass, doesn't he? That means he has to find the only begotten daughter to whom heaven gave birth on the Christian foundation. And so mother's really giving a different lens to Father's specific mission, which he did accomplish, right? He found the only begotten daughter. They received the blessing and they gave blessing to others. And so he fulfilled that. But this is a shift in our theological understanding of true parents' mission at this time. It's not that much of a shift if you think about it, right? We knew that the whole point of the Messiah coming of the second advent was to receive the blessing. But it's like this other half of the equation that we haven't really brought to light about how the only begotten daughter is a crucial element of this time of the providence. And this question, which has come up in so many of the speeches we read together, and I hope by now you're like really aware of it and understanding the significance of it. She says, if the Messiah could have met the only begotten daughter in a welcoming Christian environment, and they had assumed the position of true parents, would we have been called heretics for the past 60 years? Now, she's phrased this question many different ways in many different speeches, but it's this lamentation of mother's heart. And she's over and over talking about 60 years, the 60 years of the providence, the length of true parents' marriage together. She's lamenting over the fact that from their first time being blessed together, that true mother wasn't welcomed. Specifically, the only begotten daughter was not received in a welcoming Christian environment, she says here. But in other situations, she's asking what if the truth of the identity of the only begotten daughter had been revealed in its fullness, how different of a situation would we be at this time? And so over and over in these speeches, it's like true mother's trying to tell us something. She's trying to say, look, you guys, something didn't go according to plan. And it's hard for me. It's a regret for me. It's a sadness for me. And I'm looking at it now and I'm reflecting on it now. And I'm talking with true Father in spirit world. And it's time to address this. It's time to bring this forward. And because she's repeating it over and over, I think she's really hoping we can begin to understand what she's trying to say and how important it is to her and to the providence. Heaven brought about the birth of Jesus, the first coming, and also the birth of the only begotten daughter at her first coming. Again, she's pairing up Jesus as the first coming and mother as the first coming side by side now. This is different to think about it like this. But in the context of the second coming, especially in Japan, it was Christian pastors that were behind some of the kidnapping and confinement cases. Yes, Christian pastors were opposing us. So she's lamenting over the painful history of true parents who were not easily accepted by Christianity, and Christianity actually stood firmly against them and fought against them. And what a painful and lonely course that has been for the last 60 years. And then she starts to talk about her history and how God has protected her and her family. She says, my uncle on my mother's side went to study in Japan. His father had wanted him to become a doctor, but he was put off by the fact that doctors have to do surgery on their patients and see much blood. So he studied pharmacology instead. He was supposed to return home when he graduated, but we received news that he had joined the South Korean army as a medic. And you might remember this from Mother's memoir in the beginning, where she's talking about as they're escaping, that they're trying to find her uncle. And it's kind of a miraculous experience where they do find him in the end. That is why we came to South Korea, to find her uncle. At the time, men could not move about. Aside for those who were already in the South, the men left in the North could not go south as we did. And so my grandfather could not come with us, but stayed behind. And my grandmother, mother, and I came to the South by ourselves. So she's giving a little more understanding of why her grandfather stayed behind and why it was just the three women who crossed the border. This is a piece that I don't think I read or understood from the memoir. So she's revealing a little more about the situation and how God was working. We barely made it. At the time, I had a cold and was coughing constantly, and my grandmother put some taffy in my mouth and carried me on her back. Hearing a noise near their guard posts late at night, the South Korean soldiers thought North Korean soldiers had come down. As they watched closely, they heard a child's voice. They had been about to shoot, but then they lowered their guns. I had asked if I could sing and had actually begun singing. The South Korean soldiers told us you were in grave danger, but you were saved by your little child. And I think most of us have heard a version of the story or read this piece from the memoir, but I ask myself, like, why Mother's sitting there with leaders? Why is Mother going down this aspect of memory lane? Why is she revisiting this to us? And I feel like what she's trying to do, and I'm curious for your insights too, but I feel like she's trying to help people understand how much God was protecting her in every little instant. Even her cough and her cold, she's bringing that up. And of course, her singing and her wanting to sing, and that being the reason that the South Korean soldiers didn't shoot her. She's trying to tell us something significant about her life, and we should try to understand her heart and pay attention to that. So now she comes back to the business after reminding everybody about how God has been working in her life. Now we need to go beyond managing Cheon Hwa Gung and actually bring in the harvest. We need a revival. Just as is done at Chuncheonwon in Korea, you should display pictures of Hyojin, Hungjin, and Daemonim on the wall. And I love this emphasis on bringing in the harvest and a revival. It feels very serious. It feels very urgent and important to Mother that something has to happen in America, specifically about second and third generation. This is a sacred place, and it would be nice to have people surrounding it with prayer and devotions. One person is not enough. In order to hold workshops here, you will need a cooperative staff. The mother figures here may do cleaning and housekeeping, but you need people to lead the holy songs and strike the drum as well. You should assign people. And she's giving specific direction here about the standard with which she's imagining this will take place. Not a half-hearted effort, but a very high quality effort. And while we were in Korea, part of the education we received from Lee Ki-sung was about this whole surrounding the Cheonbokwan area with prayer and devotions, and the kind of prayer and devotions which are very serious. And they've been doing these prayers for several hundred days every night to bring about spiritual energy to protect this area in Cheonpyeong. And so I think she's really wanting us to have the same level of spiritual investment that they do in Cheonpyeong. That is why I thought of Chung Jin-hwa. This was the young man who was announced in Korea that he was moving from, I think, Africa to the USA. And it was super shocking to all of us. None of us knew who he was. He's got a young spirit. Seems like a very nice person. I don't know him personally, but they've definitely on the American side, there was like who is this stranger coming in to lead this Changpyeong Providence in America. But also she specifically said he should come and teach second and third generation. He should educate second and third generation. So you can imagine the feeling of all of us, like, is this a good idea? That kind of feeling. The mother explains who he is and why she chose him. She says his father, Chung Soo-won, is one of the 36 couples, and his father, Chung Sok-jeon, was the son of Kim Song-do. It was he who guided Daemonim when he came to South Korea, even though Daemonim was his senior in terms of faith. So she's really looking at his lineage and how much their family has supported the providence of true parents. He had a younger sibling named Cheon Hwa, who had received a revelation about Jesus's mission and lived on Jeju Island. There was a reason we went to Jeju Island. I wonder how things turned out for those people. So again, she's going down memory lane and thinking about how God has put these pieces together. And it's almost like she's trying to continue that by looking back and moving on with the next generation. Internally, we have a deep connection, and he is a son of this family. So I respect that. If that's mother's heart behind this kind of assignment, that we have a deep connection internally and he's a son of this family, then I understand mother's heart, right? She feels spiritually it's a trustworthy family that can handle this kind of appointment. If he is lacking in any way, you should help him out so that he can succeed. Isn't that right, Cheon Shim-won chairman? That's Dr. Kim. He says, yes. As chair of Cheon Shim-won, you should assist him well while fulfilling your duties as the head of the training center. So this whole domain is under Dr. Kim's leadership and guidance. And this Cheon Hwa Gung has been assigned to kind of carry it out and specifically focus on second and third generation. Thinking of Chung Jinhwa when he comes, it was this place I thought of first. This place meets the conditions. I first thought we could expand this house and use it as a church building, but I am informed that you have a church building and a family cafe as well. If that is the case, then this place should be used for training second and third generation members to enable them to find work, educate others, or go out witnessing. When the idea to use this house for that purpose came to me, I rushed here to share it with you. And I love that. Like, mother's like, I finally figured it out, you guys. I got the greatest idea. It's so clear to me. Come pay attention. Please understand. Please make this happen. It's this like beautiful, excited heart that if you receive it that way, you want to give your full energy to be able to support this initiative. And I'm intrigued by, this building, not just it's for second and third generations, but it's not just to witness, but it's to find work. That's not something our members, our leaders ever talk about. Like, let's help second and third generation get good jobs so they can support their family. No one's ever said that before. But mother's thinking very practically, of course, also about witnessing as well. But she sees they need to go hand in hand. You can't sacrifice one for the other. We should educate others on the true parents philosophy. The Divine Principle lecture should also teach about true parents. Christianity dates back 2,000 years, and hundreds of years before it was officially recognized by Rome in 313. During that period, the New Testament was written by the apostles and spread across the entire world. And it's interesting, she's talking about the Divine Principle lecture should also teach about true parents. She's seeing that, I think many of us have heard that there's they're working on a revision of the Divine Principle, maybe a more complete version of it. And perhaps including true parents is going to be a key component of that. Right now, when you do witnessing, you read the DP and you kind of like leave it up in the air and you say, hope, please pray about it. You kind of just like leave it like that. And actually come to think about it, Myung, when you did Chosen, you guys included True Parents Life as part of that 40-day education. So it seems like you were already totally united with True Mothers. So good leadership on you, Myung. Now it is time for us to teach others the truth of the providence, the truth of human history, and the essence of the Creator. What is the Creator's wish? It is to become the true parent of humanity. We therefore need to give presentations on the theory of true parents. So she's really emphasizing that the role of true parents is what we need to focus on the most right now. And I think within that, as we're studying Mother's words, we understand that it's particularly about the only begotten daughter and what that means for the providence. Until now, civilization and human history has been dominated by men. I feel like we read this exact statement in a different speech. Christians say that is due to Eve's fall. Yet two people were cast out of the Garden of Eden. Was it just Eve? With history unfolding centering on men, it came out that way. So, I mean, please read that on your own and like get excited about it. But my internal reaction to that is like, hell yeah, mother, like set the record straight, because it is true. A lot of like the thinking about the fall is blaming Eve and that it was the woman who caused the fall. But mother's really setting the record straight here, that it was not just the woman. It's not Eve's mistake that we're only trying to repair here, but there's so much more to the story about the fall. And I feel like with that, she's just scratching the surface of what really happened and what we're really restoring here. And I'm excited by that statement. The time has come to reveal the truth. Over and over, mother is saying, we have to reveal the truth. And I feel like that's not just because we need to go witness. I feel like it's also for our members. Mother is saying for our own education, there's truths we have not fully understood yet that has not been fully revealed. So hence, the United States should once again take the position to contribute to God's providence. And mother's probably thinking about, you know, the role that the United States has played in the past in the providence. And we know we've had our troubles, right? We have not been growing as a movement in America. We've been struggling in that area. And mother is really looking to us to fulfill our role at this time. But the United States is so complicated, which is what we usually say when people say we need to go witnessing, right? This is complicated. You have to find the right way for people. Every effort should be made to ensure that the Christian realm is united and upholds God's will. Thus, all pastors who have joined up with us should tithe. We must guide them to do so. They must set some condition. Now, this is interesting. This is, you know, looking at the ACLC realm. I heard a little bit further insight from this, but the idea that our Christian pastors need to get to the final level, which is basically being members. It doesn't mean they need to come to our church service, but they need to be included as members by really tithing for the holy days. They should be just as much of a part of our tradition as we are. There should be no separation between our Christian pastors who love true parents just as we do. They must set some conditions, she says. Sorry. So that is where that speech ends. There's a lot to unpack in there, and it's really exciting. Clearly, there were other things that Dr. Young shared in morning devotion that may have happened at a different time, but for me, this was just like so exciting, such a window into mother's heart and her mind and what she's thinking and what are the priorities for America. This was totally a message for the American leadership. So there's a lot for us to kind of reflect on and digest and figure out where we fit and how we can move it forward. So I'll end my piece here, and I'm very curious about others' responses.